Most professionals spend their careers chasing attention. They buy ads, blast cold email lists, and shout into the void of social media, hoping someone important will notice. But the market rarely buys from the most seen. It buys from the most trusted. This illustrates the gap between chasing strangers and leveraging relationships. When you send a cold email, you are fighting for a success rate of 2 to 5%. Route that exact same request through a warm introduction, and the open rate jumps past 70%. The standard growth playbook tells us to scale up our volume to compensate for those terrible cold odds. It assumes the problem is a lack of reach, when the actual barrier is a lack of human trust. The decisions that dictate the trajectory of your business are made in private rooms that cold attention never enters. To actually get in, you need access. In 1995, Jeff Bezos walked away from Wall Street to sell books out of a garage. He had no customers, no proof. When he needed money to build Amazon, he didn't pitch venture capitalists. He went to his parents. They wrote him a check for nearly $250,000, a massive chunk of their life savings. They did this knowing there was a 70% chance they would lose every penny. The investment was made on the strength of a warm relationship, long before a spreadsheet could justify the risk. 3 years later, the founders of Google needed funding. Instead of cold emails, they relied on a Stanford professor who introduced them to Andy Bechtolsheim. After a quick porch demo, he wrote them a $100,000 check. In both of these cases, the first critical yes came before the market had any reason to agree. Bechtolsheim wrote the check before Google legally existed, and the Bezos family backed a person, not a forecast. They prove that when a venture is at its riskiest, trust is the only currency that actually trades. To bypass the gatekeepers, you stop viewing yourself as a guest waiting for an invite. You become the host. After a wrist injury ended his football career, Lewis Howes was broke and sleeping on his sister's couch in Ohio. He had a laptop and a desire to learn from successful people who had no immediate reason to take his calls. Rather than asking them for a networking favor, he asked if he could interview them. He created a podcast. Each conversation gave his guest a small stage to share their expertise and gave him a valid reason to be in the room. We call this a container. When you host a show or a dinner, you tap into deeply ingrained human psychology. People are naturally drawn to those who share their interests, who accept them without an immediate agenda, and who make them feel uniquely seen. By stepping into the role of the host, the entire power dynamic flips. You avoid the friction of being a salesperson asking for 30 minutes of their time, and instead become a peer offering them a gift. Hosting is a highly measurable mathematical engine. You start by defining the exact outcome you want, say 12 new major clients in the next year, and work backward. As this diagram shows, you start by mapping out your Project 100. These are the people who already know and trust you. You aren't pitching them, you are treating them as bridges. Because each of those 100 people is connected to about 150 others, your warm circle instantly links you to roughly 15,000 potential introductions. From that sprawling network, you identify the specific people who can change your trajectory, and you ask your bridges for an introduction to invite them onto your show. To get 80 recorded interviews a year, the math is remarkably simple. You only need to send 4 text invitations a week. Those 80 interviews naturally filter down. Because trust is built organically on air, a predictable percentage will transition into qualified business discussions, eventually landing you those 12 target clients. To prime the pump, you identify your vouch BAV, the 5 highest leverage, most reachable contacts in your existing network. You text them, lead with the value of your platform, and ask who you'd be crazy not to feature. A 6-figure revenue goal sounds abstract. 4 specific warm invitations every Tuesday is a highly controllable action. By running the numbers backward, high-tier access stops relying on chance. Getting this system off the ground requires a brief but intense burst of effort we call the rush. For 2 solid weeks, you dedicate 1 to 2 hours a day to map your bridges, lock in your container's format, and send those first 5 invitations out the door. Once the pipeline is seated, the workload drops. The entire system is sustained by a 90-minute weekly ritual. You spend that hour and a half sourcing a few new names, showing up for your interviews, and closing the communication loops. The most critical part of that ritual happens after the microphone turns off. You send a 30-day follow-up that asks for absolutely nothing. You share a relevant article, introduce them to your network, or bring up a shared interest. When every interaction delivers value, people stop filing you away as a polite acquaintance. These zero-ask touches compound over the months, turning a one-time guest into a genuine advocate who roots for your success. As the library of conversations grows, the momentum shifts. Each guest you host becomes a visible signal to the next, allowing your past interviews to serve as a credible bridge into higher-tier rooms. Run this system for a year, and the way the market perceives you changes. You are no longer seen as someone trying to extract value from the network. You become the person whose name surfaces by reflex in the rooms you used to dream about entering. When you build the stage and hand out the microphone, you stop needing to ask for access. You become the one who grants it.